Good morning everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on PopCross Studios. Today we're hopping into part 4 of the Starseed Psyche storyline. Today it's the dual-bladed soldier and surviving the training. Let's hop in and check it out.
Previously on Starseed Psyche, Kaio Adachi and his best friend Chip and Salakali made it to the Suberaith
Yay,
Squadron
Chip.
tryouts. Kaio is 6 months into his 333-day countdown before he'll shake hands with the love of his life and his greatest rival on the same day, still uncertain about who these people will be. He is convinced that the love of his life is the creator of the Suberaith Squadron's advanced weapons tech, Yamada Toshiko, an accomplished squad member herself and daughter of the program general, Yamada Ritsu. In the 2-kilometer obstacle,
He is of course believing in himself, but I think it might be the other girl he met the other day during the training.
course that started the tryouts, Kaio and Chip had their fair share of struggles. Kaio was vexed early on by a rude, aggressive guy with a mohawk. Chip was
That's the rival.
targeted by a soldier who fired a beanbag gun at him until Kaio intervened and took the weapon from him. Kaio got his leg stuck in a trap near the end stretch that slowed him down, and then, despite having moved a fair way up in the group, he was held back right before the finish line by a soldier with a stun stick that wouldn't let Kaio finish, but let plenty of other applicants go. A girl with purple hair and impressive parkour
And that is the love interest. That's what I'm calling it.
skills silently gave Kaio the idea to fling mud in the soldier's face to distract him, and this helped Kaio finally reach the end. Unfortunately, General Yamada Ritsu ordered that a short list of recruits be detained for improper conduct, and Kaio's name was right at the top of that list.
It should have been
He was handcuffed to a
success.
table in a basement room of the Suberaith Squadron military facility where he was initially panicking, but quickly used the situation as an opportunity to challenge himself to stay calm in a crisis. He used a breathing technique
Good
he
training.
learned called box breathing or tactical breathing to calm himself, and found he was able to relax in spite of not knowing what he'd done to get himself taken away from the group. If you
Tactic
enjoy the
created-
story, please
A tactic created by US Marines.
consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the series playlist, linked in the description, with a friend that you think might enjoy it. Now,
Oh, I know, I'm
enjoy the
enjoying
next
it.
chapters of Starseed Psyche. When the door finally swung open, I was able to look up calmly at first, but to be honest, panic did set back in as the general of the Suberaith program herself, Yamada Ritsu, marched into the room holding a silver tablet.
Oh,
I
now
stood up
that's a
quickly to
surprise.
bow, but didn't get all the way up as I forgot my hands were cuffed and my body was awkwardly yanked back down. I tried as gracefully as I could to turn it into a deep bow, but it probably still looked pretty ridiculous. Sit, she said swiftly. I did as instructed,
Yes, ma'am.
but she didn't take the seat across from me. At standing height, I was probably a fair bit taller than her, but in that moment she felt like she towered over me. She didn't say anything at first, just tapping on the other side of her tablet with an expression I couldn't read. It definitely wasn't giving off any positive vibes. I noticed myself getting more anxious again, and decided to just go back to my tactical breathing.
Exactly.
Though I've tried
I was just about to say.
to do it more quietly than when I'd been alone. After an infinite 2 minutes, she finally looked up from the device and stared me dead in the eyes. If this had happened to me
Oh,
6
boy.
months ago, I'd have been losing it, but being friends with Chip had made me more used to strong eye contact. I did my best to confidently hold the gaze. Adachi Kaio, do you know what you did wrong? I didn't. I considered saying something else, but I figured if this woman had risen up the ranks of the Japanese military enough,
I would be honest and say I have no idea, but I do have some ideas of what it could have been. And then list off the ideas, and then just be like, I think, but you are the one in charge and will be the one telling me what I did at fault. So I am ready to listen and be reprimanded.
to head a brand new program made to hunt alien invaders, then there was a good chance she was perceptive enough to sniff out any hint of a lie. I took a quick deep breath and said, I don't, General Yamada. I am sorry that it isn't clear to me, but what I can promise you is that if you tell me what I did wrong and permit me to continue in the application process, I will do everything in my power to correct the mistake and make sure it never happens again.
I will correct.
I think my eyes flared a bit as I finished saying that. I was kind of impressed with myself. That was more naturally eloquent than I usually was.
That's
Unfortunately,
good.
Yamada Ritsu's expression didn't change. She did finally pull back the chair and take a seat. Why do you want to join the Suberaith program? I knew I couldn't answer that completely honestly. The line, after chatting with my spirit guide, I'm convinced your daughter might be the love of my life, even though I've only ever spoken to her for 4 seconds, probably wouldn't do me any favors. I could
Yeah,
still be mostly honest, though.
that would get you kicked out of there faster than anything.
I was in the Shibuya ward the night of the first Q-Serax attack. I was badly injured, almost killed, but before that, I got to see a Suberaith Squadron soldier in action, and she was absolutely incredible. But more important than that, on that night I realized how little I was making of my life. I was just some angry, out-of-shape office drone who complained all the time but didn't do anything to make things better.
Mm-hmm.
The doctors who helped me with my injuries
right.
on that night said that I made a miraculous recovery, and after that I decided to turn my life around. Just as I was starting to fix my life, I saw that the Suberaith Squadron was going to have an open call for applicants, and I decided that was a perfect goal to work towards. Not only would I be working towards a goal for me, but if I got in,
The
it
world
meant
as a
I could
whole.
use the new, upgraded version of me to help protect people. I want to be on the squadron so that I can keep improving myself while also saving others, General. In the silence that followed, I quickly tracked back through what I said. It may have left out some details, but it was all technically true. I thought I maybe should have leaned
Yeah, the only thing you left out was the whole speaking to a spitter guide, and most people wouldn't even believe that. Then, of course, you have Chip, who kind of had his own spitter guide encounter.
more into the selflessness angle, but I knew that would have been disingenuous. I did want to help people, but it wasn't my only drive. General Ritsu tapped a few more things into her tablet, then, without another word, stood up and left the room. Immediately, thoughts started to spiral about what stupid thing I'd done or said, but I went right back to my breathing.
Yes.
Her
Good.
reactions,
Good.
or lack of them, hadn't been encouraging, but I knew I'd done everything I could. It was frustrating how long I was being left to stew in my thoughts without an explanation of what was going on, but that was actually starting to give me a little more hope. That hope almost vanished when someone else came into the room. Finally, the door opened again. I stood up, more
who is it?
slowly this time, ready to bow to whoever entered. But I was really thrown off by who I saw. With a wry smile across his face, in walked the infuriating Mohawk guy from the tryouts.
Oh, him.
So, you gonna bow to me too, or what? I'd rather have leapt over the table and headbutted him, but in my confusion, I did give a very slight bow. Far from as
slight.
deep as I'd given General Ritsu. He noticed. You should show more respect to the newest and soon-to-be best member of the Suberaith Squadron. Not that it really matters what you do now, Adachi. He swung back the chair, sat down, and threw his muddy feet up on the table. I slowly sat down, holding back the urge to swing my leg over the table and knock his foot off. I clenched my
Don't.
teeth furiously. They seriously let this guy in? He lost his cool so hard in there, and was an absolute jerk to the soldiers who were technically just doing their jobs.
Oh yeah, complete
No, I'm not
joke.
even supposed to be in here, but I saw you through the two-way mirror and was like, what the heck? Someone's gotta tell losers like you that you're wasting everyone's time by coming to something like this. He
Oh,
swung his feet
that's
back
what he's
down
here
and leaned
for.
over the table. I heard what you said to Ritsu. You think just because you shaped up for a few months that makes you good enough to compete with people like me who have been preparing their whole life for an opportunity like this? You can't go from being a no-
Wait, how would you be preparing for your whole life when the whole Super Ray group has only been around for maybe a year at best?
nobody to a somebody in 6 months, a loser. And looking at you, I doubt you'll ever get to somebody status. Your little spurt of motivation is gonna die off and you'll go back to being the same old loser you were before. Everything he was saying, every
made it
single
this far.
sentence would have been enough to send me into a fit of rage just a few months ago. And if I actually believed him, I probably would have still had a hard time holding back my fury. Instead, a smile just kept creeping across my face. I glanced down at the bracelet with the green light on it I'd been given at the start of the event. Any of the things that had happened since hearing General Ritsu call my name back on the field would have been enough to make the old me snap. But because I'd stayed calm, early in the Mohawk guy's rant, it became almost too easy to see that something was really off about this whole situation. The new me
That this is planted?
was too smart to fall for it. I relaxed back in my chair, didn't respond, and just kept breathing slowly. Mohawk guy noticed my calm demeanor. "What's that smug look for, Adachi? You think you got anything to smile about, you good-for-nothing loser?"
I do
I
have
wasn't
something to
sure if
smile
I should
for.
respond at all, but staying as calm as I could, I said, "I don't know what exactly is going on here, but I'm pretty sure I only lose if I let you get to me. And even if this isn't part of the test, and you somehow did hear the stuff I said to General Yamada and figured out my name and really did come in here to chew me out, risking that you could get booted from the program you were apparently just accepted into, despite how you
Yep.
acted on the tryouts, it doesn't change the fact that I'm proud of everything I've done to turn my life around. And whether I get into the program or not, I am going to keep doing that work. Plus, if they
Exactly.
really did let someone like you in, I don't think I want to be here anyway." He stared at me for a moment. I expected more mocking, but none came. Finally, he stood up straight, tucked the chair in very precisely, put his hands firmly at his side, and bowed so deeply he almost smacked his head on the table.
Damn, why did he smack his head on the table?
"Adachi Kaio, please forgive me for my extreme rudeness and incredibly uncouth words and behavior." Without raising from his bow, he fished something out of his pocket and placed it on the table before me. It was the handcuff keys. I just stared in awe and confusion for a moment.
What the...
While he was still in his bow, the door swung open behind him. General Ritsu was there. "Squad Captain Hekima, how many times must I tell you? Over-the-top apologies are not necessary."
Squad captain? Oh, he was literally planted within the training group just for this.
"Everybody will be informed that you were a plant." She looked past him to me. "Well done, Private
Incredible.
Adachi." The word private echoed through my head like a triumphant trumpet. I should have thanked her, but I was too in shock and, of course, still very confused.
And he
General
made it.
Ritsu let the
Yes!
door swing closed and continued off down the hall without us. Mohawk guy finally stood back up, and weirdly his eyes almost seemed to be watering. He gestured to the handcuff keys. I grabbed them and started uncuffing myself. "I know I've made a pretty terrible first impression, Private Adachi, but as General Yamada said, I was a plant in the application tests.
I see
My
that.
specialty prior to joining the Suberaith program 6 months ago was espionage and infiltration. I was put on the field to see if I could make people lose their cool, strike a fellow recruit, or act as generally terribly as I was acting out there. It was part of the psychological test." He raised his wrist and tapped on his bracelet. "You figured it out, right? It seemed like you did anyway." Still dumbfounded, I said, It's a heartbeat monitor, right? To see if we can keep our heart rate down in stressful situations?" He rocked his head back
Very
and forth.
clever.
"Well, not just that, but yeah, you mostly got it. Follow me." Wait. I stopped him before he turned for the door. "So, am I seriously in? Is
Yeah,
that it?
you made
I'm
it.
in the program?" He smiled widely. "Well, the next 4 months are the real test of who can hack it, but based on everything you've said here today, I'm not worried about you, Adachi. Guys whose lives have never been royally messed up don't respect what they've got as much as guys like you, who had to dig themselves out of a dark place. You're gonna crush it here, man.
I'm loving
excited
it.
to see it happen." The roller coaster of emotions of that day was almost too much for me, but I finally just let my heart race with excitement. I felt like I was about to start crying with joy. The squad captain noticed
Yes.
the exhilaration swelling up in me and tapped a knuckle on the wall, saying, "It's a soundproof room when the hidden mics are turned off, and I'm pretty sure
Oh.
nobody's on the other side of the two-way mirror right now. Celebrate as big as you want, Private Adachi." I collapsed to my knees, threw my arms in the air, and just screamed excited nonsense. I had actually made it. Despite all the times that
yes.
almost broke me, I'd really done it. I was in the Suberaith program. When I was finally done, Hekima chuckled. "Come on, Private. We've got to see how your body responds to the Suberaith gauntlets." I threw my head back and stared at him.
This is gonna be awesome.
Wait, am I putting one of the suits on now? "Not the full suit, but we've got to see what kind of blade you get and test your power percentage. Come on." We walked back up out of the basement
Alright.
through the gray halls. Hekima gave me a change of clothes, a towel, and a few minutes in the showers so I could get all the caked and flaking mud off myself. The clothes were much tighter than what I usually wore, but once I put them on, I also took a second to appreciate. I was starting to look good in tight clothes.
Say it. Say your shoulders. Say something about your damn shoulders.
After that, I continued through the facility with Hekima as he explained more about himself and the test I'd just passed. Squad Captain Hekima Aka was this guy's full name and title. The reason I thought I'd recognized him earlier that day was because I
Damn, I guess nothing about his shoulders. Alright.
actually had seen the odd picture of him in his Suberaith suit on the program's social media pages, but he had the helmet on, so I'd never seen his mohawk. He'd been part of the program since before the first round of tryouts. He was also an incredible actor, because it felt like I was talking to a completely different person. He apologized about 5 more times for how he'd spoken to me. I knew it had been an act now and told him it was okay, but he seemed genuinely beaten up about how he treated me, even though it was literally his job to try and make potential recruits snap. The bracelets we wore not only tracked our heart rate, but also our brain waves, breathing rate, and could even track our emotional states to a certain degree. Hekima explained, "The Suberaith tech is more advanced than anything I've seen. Well, from humans anyway, but it's also unique in its effect on the body and mind, and gets affected itself differently by different people. For one thing, the Suberaith gauntlets form a unique blade for whoever's wearing them, based on the power it pulls from your body. Honestly, the way General Yamada-Ritsu explains it, I don't think she or most of the higher-ranking officials really understand how it works. Seems like..."
Honestly, that's just very common. And the people that use the tech most commonly don't know how it actually works in the first place.
Squad Captain Yamada Toshiko is really the only one who knows, since she invented the stuff.
Except
But
the cradle.
keeps kinda tight-lipped about it. Anyway, the size and shape of the blade that forms is unique for everyone, though there are a lot of similar ones. Besides that, though, the reason we have to do a lot of psychological tests and training is because a side effect of the suit is that, while wearing it, your emotional state will be super amplified. If you get mad or scared or anxious in the field while you've got them on, you'll basically become an unpredictable or useless mess out there. A lot of people fail the recruitment process because their anger gets the best of them, and that basically makes them a guaranteed no-can-do for joining the program. I practically stopped in my tracks when he said that. I'd never thought about working on my anger issues as being something that would help me with getting into this program. If I hadn't been reading and rereading Argent Angelo's book on anger, changed who I spent time with, and had only focused on improving my body, then I wouldn't have made it in. It also gave me more hope that
you will have only been half qualified.
This place would help me in my transformation into my best self even more, since they clearly had to help us improve our mental fortitude. Captain Hekima went on to explain the specifics of how I'd performed in the test. They'd told soldiers to target potential recruits that showed the most physical potential, hence them targeting Chip early on. They took notice of me after I protected Chip, then went and took the gun from the soldier shooting at us. Having Hekima shoot the soldier who had fired on him was planned, to see if it would be a bad influence on anyone else and inspire them to do the same. The fact that I didn't do that had meant points for me.
So that's why he shot him in the crotch.
After that, they were tracking my performance more closely. I performed well enough physically to be considered, and after I got my foot trapped in the mud pit, they were impressed with how quickly I got myself free. Then, when the soldier wouldn't let me pass to the end, I didn't snap like Hekima had been pretending to, and found a creative solution. Though, really, that had been the idea of the purple-haired parkour girl, but at least I'd been looking for another way out. The soldiers near the end had, again, been instructed to target specific recruits that had performed well physically and psychologically, hence why they were after Chip and me. Getting called on and pulled out of there early under the guise of improper conduct was something I should have taken as a compliment. Most of the other participants were still going through tryouts, while I and a few others were already finished. Everything I'd gone through in that room was meant to test how calm I could remain in a stressful and confusing situation. Stress and uncertainty were almost guaranteed to come up in the field when fighting the Q-Seracs, an enemy we still knew very little about. To get into training, we had to prove that we could stay calm even when we didn't understand what was going on. Those of us who passed that next set of tests in the interrogation rooms had been immediately accepted into the program.
And that's very
I was a little nervous about Chip getting in too, but I knew he wouldn't struggle with any anger or anxiety tests. He was solid in body and mind. We eventually walked into a large airplane hangar on the far end of the main Suberaith compound that had pretty advanced-looking jets along one side. Along the other, there were a few dozen metallic platforms attached by thick wires to a row of computers along the wall. Only 7 platforms have
Suberaith suit-up stations.
recruits on them, being guided through the process of putting on and testing the Suberaith gauntlets.
Oh my god,
But
they
I
all.
seriously made it in the top 8 fastest people to get recruited that day? Hekima brought me to one of the empty 1 meter by 1 meter, slightly elevated platforms, then left me for a moment to go grab my gauntlet. I was almost too excited to wait, and was wondering how the gauntlet might amplify my excitement. Maybe I needed to calm down a bit before I put it on.
I would do some
Though
breathing.
that would be hard to do once I saw another set of people entering the hangar. It was the purple-haired girl, who I wanted to thank for helping me out, but leading her was Yamada Toshiko. I felt like I suddenly forgot how to have a normal face. I wasn't sure if I should look away or acknowledge them both or what. I completely lost track of my breathing. They were headed right towards me, likely going for the empty platform next to me. They were chatting as they walked, but when they were close, Toshiko glanced up at me. My heart pounded even faster. She tilted her head and squinted her eyes a bit. Did she recognize me from the night she saved me? I looked different now, but my face and hair were pretty similar, though it had been dark and she'd been focused on fighting. I started to open my mouth, but before I could say anything, Hekima walked back over, holding the gauntlet and looking at the tablet in his other hand. Adachi, what's going on with you? Your heart rate is going crazy. You seriously that excited about putting the tech on? Yep,
Yes.
that's it. Just really excited about putting on the gauntlet, Captain. I glanced back over as the purple-haired girl stepped up on the platform beside me. Toshiko said she'd be back, then walked away.
Oh, God.
Before I could say anything, Hekima handed me my gauntlet. Alright, Adachi, slow your heart rate a bit, then get this thing on. Let's see what you get. I closed my eyes and went back to my tactical breathing. A couple minutes later, Hekima gave me the all clear, and I put the gauntlet on. I did my best to take my mind off Toshiko. Even if she did turn out to be the love of my life, we wouldn't shake hands for months. Plus, I was pretty excited to try on that gauntlet. I slipped it on and it promptly tightened around my right forearm. It was warm and I could feel points of pressure where it felt like it was latching onto my forearm muscles.
Not
A
bad.
wave of blue light burst from it across my body, like it was scanning me. When that finished, the spot where the blades usually appeared started to glow. In a hexagonal pattern, the blades started to illuminate into existence.
Oh, that's
It got
awesome.
bigger and bigger to a point where I was surprised by
I would like to actually see that animated.
its size. I'd only seen this tech in person once before, but the blade seemed to be bigger than what Toshiko had used, though hers could split into 3 separate pieces. I wasn't sure if mine could do that. I also hadn't
We'll
expected
find out.
mine to be blue. I'd seen a few different colors in images of the gauntlet users, but didn't remember seeing blue before. I raised the blade in front of me excitedly when it solidified. It felt so cool.
That
It
is
never
kind of
felt so
interesting.
powerful. When wearing the
I
full
wonder what determines the color of it. Eye, hair, or what? Because in like a webcomic I used to read, it's on hiatus, that's why I say I used to. In Unordinary, it's determined by kind of both. Like your hair color is what determines the actual glow of your quark, I think they called it. But your eye color can determine like its afterglow.
suit, our strength and speed would get elevated as well, but I could tell just by wearing the gauntlet that I was
something to that
already
degree.
getting part of that benefit. Plus, I could totally sense that my feelings of excitement were getting even more amplified. When I was still admiring the blade, I heard Hekima saying something into a communications device in his ear. General Ritsu, I've got some fantastic news.
Oh yeah.
Private Adachi Kaio has maxed out his gauntlet on Platform 16. No, really, maxed out 100%.
Whoa.
Before I could ask what that meant, he said, "Sit tight, Private, I'm going to get you another gauntlet." He was about to walk away when
Awesome.
Toshiko darted over to him and grabbed his tablet, staring at whatever information about me was on it. Her eyes widened, and I felt my heart start racing again, which was bad considering she was looking at a tablet that clearly showed her my heart rate, among other things. I started trying to breathe slowly, but thankfully Hekima
I mean, it's still impressive. He maxed it out, and from what the captain is saying, this has never happened before. Not even by her, the top cadet and inventor of the equipment.
distracted her by playfully saying, "Hey, back off, Toshi, he's my recruit." She handed him back the tablet. "For now he is, but if he makes it through training, I'm stealing him from my squad." She glanced very briefly into my eyes before walking back to her platform. You've got a
Be a
big
little
advantage,
smug.
Private Adachi. Don't blow it. I won't, I stammered, trying to hide my confused excitement. She wanted me on her squad already? Could this day seriously get any more perfect?
Yes.
Toshiko
Ship.
started focusing on the purple-haired girl again, though I noticed how she kept glancing over at me and the blade on my arm. Hekima walked off quickly to grab another gauntlet. I wasn't sure what was going on until General Ritsu marched quickly into the hangar and came right up to me. I stood as tall and confident as I could. Her expression was far less stern than it had been during the test. She almost had a warmth to her, but I figured that may have been because of whatever great thing was happening with my Suberaith gauntlet.
Oh, 100%.
Private Adachi, in your
100%.
interview you stated that you only began turning your life around after the first Q-Serax invasion of Tokyo. Prior to that, had you partaken in any martial arts, competitive athletics, or other such recurring intensive physical activities? I choked on my words slightly as
Yeah, I used to take dance when I was a kid, but then I ended up quitting that because people around me were saying I would never make a living as it, and it was a waste of time, all that nonsense. But after the attack, I turned my life around and got back into dancing.
I said. No, other than when I was young, I regularly took dance classes,
There
but
it
I
is.
stopped around age 13, until starting them again recently, to improve my balance and durability, General. I noticed Toshiko glance up at me again with a smile that, at the time, I interpreted as mocking. General Ritsu replied, Very interesting. As I'm sure you've been informed, the Suberaith technology draws its power and its form from energy within the body of the wearer. The average recruit is able to power the blades between 60 and 75%. Squad
Pretty
Captain
average.
Yamada Toshiko has had the highest maximum at 88.8%. I wasn't able to hold back a smile hearing 888, what I knew to be the angel number for balance. But I assumed nobody else would have caught that reference, so I...
Oh, yeah, actually, speaking about that, after the last video we did, well, it was all about angel numbers, I actually did look them up to see what it was. And from all the way from 111 to 999 actually has different meanings. So it actually is kind of interesting.
I kept quiet. The general continued. Thus far, it is still not entirely understood
neat.
how much the blades pull their power from someone's physical strength and how much from their mental fortitude. She gave an odd look to her daughter as she said that, but quickly turned back. Regardless, we have never had someone max out the gauntlets. Until now. She gestured down to my blade. Before I could respond, Hekima walked back over with a left-handed gauntlet and held it out to me. First time for everything. Now let's see how far over 100 you can go. I understood and even more excitedly slipped on the other gauntlet. I wondered if somehow Yorick was making these things work better for me, or if it was a combination of the physical and mental training I'd gone through.
Oh,
But
100%.
that seems too simple of an explanation. I may have made a lot of strides, but I couldn't already be mentally and physically leagues beyond the other people who'd used the tech.
But those people haven't been doing the training you have. Yes, you may have just been returning back to what should be your real life. If you have still been improving yourself far beyond what most people would. Yeah, some people probably will train the physical bodies, some people will probably only train the mental bodies. You were training everything.
I was confident, but not that arrogant. There had to be some other reason the tech was working so well for me. When the other gauntlet's blades started to appear, the one on my right arm shrunk, but only slightly. The left grew until it matched the size and shape of the right, leaving me with two blue blades as long as my arms.
Let me guess. Both of them are going to be maxed out at 99.99. I mean, 0.9. Whoops. I did 19 too many.
I'd kind of expected the new blade to be smaller, and from the reactions I was getting, the others had clearly expected the same. General Ritsu looked over at Hekima. He looked from his tablet up to her. This is crazy. Both gauntlets have leveled out at 77.7%, General. I laughed excitedly, thanks to the tech elevating my mood even further. Again, they didn't know I was laughing because another angel number had popped up. 777, the number for luck and prosperity. Maybe that meant I was just getting really lucky, but regardless of the reason, I became the first ever private to be given permission to wield 2 Suberaith gauntlets for training. I'd already made a splash
Awesome.
and felt as confident as ever before that I was going to get that handshake with Toshiko. But just because I'd made a good first impression didn't mean the next 4 months of training were going to be easy. Little did I know that every single day of training was going to make tryouts seem like a vacation.
That's normally how it always goes, but damn man, I can't believe it! You were the first to ever max out and to level out at 77.7.
After the gauntlet fitting, the recruits were brought to a rec room that had couches, TVs, coffee, tea, some games like ping pong, and a few rows of tables. We were all given paperwork and talked through some legal stuff before officially signing up. We had to sign a bunch of waivers about physical injuries we were likely to incur. Not just ones that were possible, but likely, and that was just for the next 4 months of training. Of the 1,000 or so people who came to the tryouts, we were getting whittled down to 100 for the training period, but they anticipated only 50 would make it through to graduating to official Suberaith squadrons. I also got the sense that they thought 50 was optimistic. It was going to be an intense 4 months, but I honestly felt more excited about it than nervous. I'd made it this far. Even if it was going to be difficult, I'd gotten pretty good.
Here's the question so far. Where's Chip?
At doing
Has
difficult
he made it
things.
Where
I
is
was
he?
certain I could get through it. Though, it was a lot easier to be confident in that moment when I hadn't gotten to see and feel firsthand just how difficult our training would really be. They told us we were going to live on site at the base for the next 4 months, and that we'd be training and going through classes 6 days a week, with Sunday off to do as we pleased. They'd be feeding us, providing us with clothing, and be paying us a minimal amount, to be increased significantly if we made it through to the official squad status.
Not bad.
When I was done with all my
That's pretty
papers,
good.
there were only a few of us in the room. Squad leader Hekima had gone back out to play his part for the other recruits. It was wild watching him dip back into his massive jerk mode. He was a total chameleon. Toshiko had brought the purple-haired girl in, then gone back out herself. When that girl was done with her papers, I went up to her. "Hey, I'm Adachi Kaio. Just wanted to say thanks for the tip with the mud. I don't know if I would have finished without that advice." She glanced me up and down. "No sweat, you can thank me by providing some good competition for me, dance boy." It took me a second to remember she'd heard what I'd said to General Ritsu about my dance classes. She continued, "I don't want it to be too easy for me to prove that I'm the most agile person here. You already have a way better gauntlet percentage than me, so I'm gonna have to show you up plenty with my moves." Mid-conversation, she threw a backflip like it was nothing, then stuck out her hand. "Quinjin, or Jin Quinn now that I'm back in Asia. 3-time international parkour champion and soon to be internationally best-selling manhwa creator." As usual, I was alarmed by someone going for a handshake. I later learned that Quinn was Korean-born and had lived in America for a few years while she was in the professional parkour scene. But the thing that struck me to ask her as I shook her hand was, if you're working on being a best-selling artist, why join the Suberaith program? Are you kidding me? It's a perfect setup. I get to fight aliens while getting story fuel for my manhwa. I've already done market research and alien fiction has skyrocketed.
Manhwa, so that's how it's actually pronounced. Okay. Reason why I was wondering about this is because I've actually read a few of them before, and I understand that it is a Korean manga, but I've never known how to pronounce it. Manhwa. Thank you.
In
So very
popularity
much.
since the
Thank
Cusidians
you.
showed up. Making a comic inspired by real experience fighting aliens is going to be a guaranteed hit. Then after that, I'll get a movie deal for it, make sure whoever the hottest celebrity at the time is gets cast as the male lead, marry him, go into motivational speaking for a while, have 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, then I'm not sure. It should take about 10 years to get all that done, so we'll see what happens after that. Maybe I'll become an astronaut next, depending on how this whole Q-City and Q-Serac situation goes. There should be some interesting developments in space travel coming soon. Wow, that's a lot you're planning to accomplish. She nodded proudly. People think life is short, but that's just because so many people waste so much time not actually living theirs. I'm gonna get so much living done in my life that it proves to other people how much more they can accomplish. So be some good competition for me, would ya? I learn faster when I'm competing. After hearing her talk and shaking her hand, I was kinda leaning towards the idea that she'd end up being my rival. I'd certainly have a hard enough time keeping up with her in those first few weeks. As the day went...
I mean, the idea of her being the rival is actually a lot more likely now, considering that the whole guy I thought was going to be the rival, the jock, turns out instead is just going to be his captain. And he's actually a really nice guy.
More excited privates came into the rec room. Once there were about 60 people in there, I finally saw the hulking frame of Chip walking in behind Heckema.
There he is!
I darted through the growing crowd when I saw him.
Hug
Heckema
him.
knew Chip and I had come together, so he stepped aside to let me give the big guy a hug. I excitedly said, "Together or not at all." Never doubted us for a second, friendo. Chip and Gaio, yeehaw! Chip told me what he'd gone through after I left. He'd been worried about me, but like me, he suspected there was a chance I was just being taken for further testing. He thought it was unlikely I'd actually done anything bad enough to be detained. For Chip and the others, there had been 2 more full rounds of obstacle courses. Some people were cut after each one, not living up to the physical requirements. Then, at the end, Chip and most of our group who remained were simply told, "Thank you, you may leave." Making it more frustrating was the fact that the people they'd asked to stay had been some of the potential recruits who'd performed the worst physically out of those remaining. Chip explained, "I was mad as all get out, but I noticed something odd. They didn't ask us for our bracelet thingos back. They had us waiting in a roped-off area out front for a shuttle they said was coming for us, and a bunch of folks started cussing out the whole program and saying it was a waste of their time. I got to thinking about what you said about military folks staying calm in stressful situations, and thought, this here is a right stressful situation, but I reckon I've got a good way to stay calm." I asked excitedly, "Did you do the breathing?" He grinned. "I did the breathing, friendo. Half hour later, General Yamada-Ritsu herself came out and took 6 of us back inside, saying we had passed. I was one of the 6. Chip had already gotten his gauntlet fitted, and it had leveled up to 69% power.
Nice.
Which Chip had cackled at, given the suit was amplifying his emotional state, and that number is funny for some reason in America. At the end of the day, we were all taken to our bunk rooms. Chip and I were in the same room as Jin Quinn, 14 other privates, and our squad captain, Heckema Aka. We weren't officially a squad, but for the purposes of training, we'd all been split up into tentative squads based on the room we were sleeping in. It was lights out at 9 p.m., and the next morning, Heckema marched through, banging on our beds to get us up at 5 a.m. It was time for training to begin. I wasn't as ready for it as I thought I'd be. The very first day was like an amplified version of tryouts. We had to do 3 rounds of obstacle courses as our warm-up, only this time both the mud and water were freezing. After that, we were given weighted 25-pound vests and taken on a 10-kilometer run. That was so exhausting, I was sure it had to be the last thing they were going to make us do. But in reality, we weren't even halfway through our training for the day. When the run was finished, they sent us through another obstacle course, one particularly heavy on the freezing mud. I was practically done.
What's with all the freezing mud? At some point, you're not going to have mud, just going to have cold dirt.
Delirious by the time we got there, and was at the back of the pack the entire time. I kept myself going, but I doubted I was impressing anyone with how I performed. At least Chip was by my side for most of it, and that helped me stay somewhat sane. When we finished that last course, I was desperate for food, but we were immediately sent into the hangar for endless reps of push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, all while we were still covered in cold mud, and they had massive fans aimed at us. It almost made the exhausting exercises more appealing, because at least that would warm up my freezing body ever so slightly. But eventually my limbs started to feel like wet noodles, and I could barely get through one push-up or squat without falling. This training was a lot less flashy than what I'd seen on social media. Squad members flipping about in their Suberaith suits, carving up mannequins and slicing through targets.
That's going to be later on.
That sort of helped me keep going. After the workout in the hangar, they finally gave us some food and water. We were split back up into our bunk rooms, but told to eat in silence. Our whole group was exhausted. Except for Chip. I mean, he looked tired too, but he also seemed exhilarated, like this was the best day of his life.
That's Chip.
I knew exercise was his drug of choice, but it was weird to see someone enjoying this torture so much.
You know, something I've kind of noticed with the way he draws the main character here is that he has this one little bit of hell that's constantly up, like in all of his designs, like in the one from episode 1 and in both drawings from today's episode. It's a little strange. It gives him a little bit of like a shark's fin.
I could tell he was also ecstatic about the food. Even through my exhaustion, I had to admit it was pretty tasty, but more important than that for Chip, it was exactly the division of vegetables, protein, and limited but still present carbs that he often prepared. They even gave us a few various vitamins to take, all of which I recognized from Chip's cabinet at his place. It was clear they knew
nice.
what they had to feed us to keep our biological ages consistently under 29. They gave us 10 minutes to rest after eating, then took us right back outside, where they had massive logs waiting for us. Hekima split us into 3 groups of 4 and 1 group of 5, then told us to carry the log to the opposite end of the Suberaith military compound. He said whatever team made it first had to do no push-ups, second place would do 50, third 100, and fourth 200. It immediately felt unfair that one group had an extra person to carry, but worse than that was the fact that Hekima split me up from Chip, despite knowing we'd come together. Chip couldn't hang back with me if he needed to support his own team. As soon as we started out, I could tell I was the weak link of my group, as I stumbled a bunch of times. The only reason we didn't come in last was because another of the groups completely fell over twice. We ended up coming third. Chip and his gang had come first. When the final group made it, Hekima surprised us by saying, "What I said about the push-ups, it's the opposite. Fourth place, you do none. First place, 200. Drop and get going."
What?
It was a bit of a relief for me, only having to do 50 instead of 100, but I could hear everyone, other than Chip, in the first place group groaning and complaining.
Chip would be cheering and then dropping and getting at them like nothing.
Unfortunately, we'd end up doing another 2 runs with those logs, and each time Hekima would change who had to do the most push-ups. We never knew whether coming in
Whose line is it anyway?
first or last was going to get us punished with more work. It made it that much more horrible of an experience. As the last event of the day, finally, we were all given our Suberaith gauntlets. I didn't even care at first that we were being sent on another run with them. At least I'd get to wear the awesome tech. I was ecstatic to get mine back, feeling a fair sense of pride by the fact that I was the only one who'd be wearing 2 of them. I also knew my excitement would get elevated by the gauntlets once I put them on, and figured my exhaustion might start to go away too. Unfortunately, once I did put them on, I noticed that my strength wasn't being elevated at all. The gauntlets just felt heavy. The blades weren't appearing either. I was about to tell Hekima about the error when I noticed that nobody's blades were appearing. The captain...
Oh, the gauntlets are most likely deactivated then, while they can only result in being weights. Like, if they're activated, then they would do the amplification plus the blade generation. But if they're deactivated, nothing, just heavy.
And turned to us once he'd put his on and said, "You may have noticed the blades and physical amplifiers are turned off. Those functions have been deactivated for this run. The gauntlets will elevate your emotional state as usual, but besides that, they're dead weight. Now let's get going."
I called it.
Immediately, a sense of hopelessness started to drown me. I knew the gauntlets were amplifying it, but that didn't change how horrible it felt. Combined, these things were heavier than the weighted vest from earlier, and this run was coming after so much more exercise. I was already wrecked. I thought there was no way I could possibly make it through that run. I might not have even started it if Chip hadn't given me a pat on the back that sent me stumbling forwards. As I struggled with every step, having both arms dangling behind me like anchors, I started thinking about how much I hated Hekima in that moment. I knew somewhere in my mind that he was just doing his job, but I couldn't let go of this idea that he was using his power to torture us. He was good at acting, so maybe his nice guy routine had been the act, and he was actually a sadist who liked torturing recruits until they snapped. After
Okay, I could see that, but you never know.
15 minutes, Hekima made that feel even more likely when he yelled out, "We've got 5 kilometers to go, unless your Suberaith gauntlet power levels are above 70. Then, you've got 10 kilometers to go." I felt like he just told me he was going to execute me for fun. I almost screamed at him with what little strength I had, but before I could, my foot hit a rock and I collapsed to the ground. As soon as my face hit dirt, I decided that there was no way I could get up. It was over. I was done, and
Come on, man.
in my head, it was all Hekima's fault.
Get up.
Luckily, before I could say or do anything stupid, someone else screamed out, "Oh, forget this!" One of our bunkmates stopped running, tore off his gauntlet, and slammed it into the ground. "You're full of it, Akka. I'm not spending another second with you, you absolute slimeball. You're no better than you were pretending to be in the tryouts." Hekima held up his hand to stop the group. He slowly walked back towards the private, leaned over, and gently picked up his gauntlet. He then looked the private in the eyes and bowed deeply. "I apologize for how I've treated you and understand your frustration. You may have one more chance." He held out the gauntlet. "Put it back on and continue, or return to base and drop out of the program. The former private spat on the ground next to Hekima, turned, and started walking back to the base.
He left.
Hekima looked genuinely heartbroken.
Oh,
He
damn.
glanced down at me with the same expression, as if he was scared that I wasn't going to get back up. My thoughts of hate towards him quickly melted away. I could tell that being so hard on people was actually really hard on him. What I saw in that saddened expression
Okay, now Hakama is actually starting to remind me of my dad. Wow.
was the real him. That look,
Mostly because my dad never wanted to be hard on his sons at all. Well, but he knew he had to be because it's called the discipline. And yes, he may have been a little harder on my brother than he was me, but still. Well, he never wanted to be mad at his boys. He loved us. And in a way, Hakama loves his crew.
only lasted a second
Sorry
before
if
his
I'm
face
messing up the
returned
name.
to the fierce determination of the ruthless character he was playing. Carrying the spare gauntlet, he turned and ran back towards the front of the group and ordered us onward. With the feelings of hate gone, I found enough strength to get back up and keep going. For the next few kilometers, I was still aching, but at least I was distracted thinking about Captain Hekima's expression. The role Hekima was playing started to become clear again. This was just a continuation of the tryouts. He was making things confusing and difficult on purpose to keep preparing us for the squad we were all trying to be a part of. On top of that, it dawned on me that he was basically training people that he would have to trust with his life and the lives of the civilians we would be sent to protect.
True,
He had to see
true.
if we could hack it both physically and psychologically. Ending the day with Suberaith gauntlets on was the ultimate way to see if we cracked under pressure. After a full day of treacherous and unfair training, if we could still keep our heads on straight and not snap under the elevated emotional pressure, then we could be trusted to be the teammates he'd need us to be when we faced real danger.
That's right.
After we finished that set of 5 kilometers, those under the 70% mark dropped away. Except, obviously, for Chip.
Oh,
He
yeah.
ran up next to Hekima and asked, "Squadron Captain, permission to finish the run with the rest of y'all." Hekima just nodded and said, "Permission granted, Private Akali." Chip then slowed till he was at the back of the group with me. "Together or not at all, friendo?"
Oh, yeah.
I nodded at him appreciatively, still in deep thought. My lungs and throat burned, my feet and legs ached, I stumbled with each step, and my arms felt as though they were about to fall off from the weight of the gauntlets. But that idea of Hekima looking for people who he could rely on to save his life kept me going. It wasn't just him who was looking for that, we all were. All of us who made it through were going to face life-threatening situations. Heck, if I was brought onto Toshiko's team, I'd likely need to be strong enough to save her at some point, while also trusting her and the rest of our squad to save my life.
That's
Even
true.
Chip's life could be in my hands at some point. This wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. I suddenly wanted Hekima to be hard on us, to make sure those of us who made it through were the people who really, truly deserved it. The more I thought about that, the more my legs started to feel sturdier. The burning in my lungs started to feel like a point of pride more than like pain.
The
I
second
actually
wind.
started laughing. Shifting into a more inspired mood, I could feel the Suberaith gauntlets doing their thing and amplifying that attitude even more. I turned to Chip with a smile and said, "Let's finish this strong." I pumped my arms and legs harder and suddenly sprang forward, darting right to the front of the pack, ahead of Jin Quinn and then even Hekima. Chip kept my pace and I turned back and panted. "Squad Captain Hekima, we know the real you is a lot cooler than you have to be when training us. So while you are training us, give us your worst and we'll prove we can handle it." Through his
Hell
ruthless character,
yes.
Hekima let a grateful smile slip across his face. Jin Quinn picked up her own pace and ran up next to Chip and me. "I knew I was gonna like you, Adachi. Thanks for the motivation." The three of us picked it up even more and ran on ahead, with Hekima watching proudly from behind. We basically sprinted that whole last kilometer before returning to the base. The second I stopped, my legs buckled and I collapsed to the ground with no idea how long I was going to have to lie there before my body would willingly work again. Chip dropped down next to me, seeming almost as puffed as I was. Jin Quinn was dancing on her toes as if she was fine, but I could tell by how she was panting that she wanted to drop too. Hekima walked up to us. "Jin, Akali, Adachi, great work today. Hope you can keep that up for another 4 months. Feeling a bit overconfident, I said, I just hope
Breathe, man.
by the end you can still keep up with us, Captain. Chip started cracking up. Hekima just pointed at me, nodded with a big grin, and walked off into the base. For some reason, the thought of my dad's last words came back to my mind as I lay there, more exhausted than I'd ever been and covered in mud and sweat.
I'm loving
I
it.
thought to myself, I don't know if this is what a beautiful life is supposed to look like, Dad, but it feels a lot better than where I was 6 months ago.
Oh, I'm loving this story. This is magnificent. Oh yeah, thank you
I
again.
loved seeing all the comments in the last episode about how much people were hating Mohawk Guy, knowing where his story was going, and knowing what else we've still got to see revealed about him down the line. I also absolutely thought we were going to be at the point where the pilot left off by the end of episode 3, and now I'm like, boy, I hope we're there by the end of episode 5. I'm pretty sure we will be, though. Anyway, if you're enjoying my stories, I started 2 new series last week, both of which are set in multiverse tales, but you can start right on those first episodes. They'll provide enough context in the first few episodes, even if you're not a big long-time fan of multiverse tales. Also, my proofreader Kathleen is well into Vigilance now. Sorry that the delay has been so long, but this is the first book that I'm self-publishing and releasing
don't worry about
in
it,
a very
man.
long
It
time,
takes
so
time,
I'm just
after
making
all.
sure I'm getting the whole thing right, figuring out the process, and hopefully the other books in the future will be a lot easier. Anyway, besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is an idea that I've heard quoted by a bunch of people in various ways, but the way it was ringing through my head this week was that life isn't what happens after you've finished your to-do list. It's everything that's happening right now, right here where you are,
That's
whether
actually
you're
pretty
super
good.
busy or not busy at all. So if you have a bunch of things that you need to be doing, just try to do your best to enjoy the process of doing them, because doing
That's
those
right.
things is a part of your life. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. The RAS Foundation Community Redraw. See you there. Goodbye.
Alright everyone, well that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of y'all next time when we flick back on. Till then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.